Don't move.
Is it scary being an FBI agent?
A letter was left with the bodies. We have 10 letters like it over the past 30 years. And all of them signed with one word. Longlegs.
Hey there movie buffs, and welcome to another review of a recent release. This time around, I'll be talking about one of the most anticipated horror titles of the year, Longlegs. By the way, spoilers ahead, so if you haven't watched the movie, add this title to your YouTube queue and come back later. Well, 2024 is quickly shaping up to be a disappointing year for horror, at least in my opinion. A year where volume doesn't equate to quality. Experimentation seems to be the name of the game, but so far the results have been mostly underwhelming. The reason why? Well, all this experimentation has ultimately yielded movies that are far too derivative to move the needle. An additional factor that's contributing to this outcome is Hollywood's hype machine that continues to promote virtually all high-visibility titles as the scariest movies since ... Funny how all the comparisons always sit with titles that were released 30, 40, 50, or even 60 years ago, leading me to believe that no significant recently released horror title managed to surpass the legacy of the oldies. Every week, social media mouthpieces announce the coming of the scariest horror movie ever made. And after the initial buzz, all is forgotten, only to begin again when streamers increase their advertising budgets. The latest addition to this gallery of misfires is Oz Perkins' Longlegs. When the teasers promoting the title started to pop up about 5 months ago, we were treated to some tense imagery with little context. Collectively, these teasers hinted at an intense thriller that pivoted itself as the heir apparent to Silence of the Lambs. The movie also benefited from the secrecy around Nicolas Cage's performance as the titular Longlegs, with much buzz around his performance. But isn't that always the case when dealing with a new Nicolas Cage movie? More on that later. But when it came time to see the real deal, surprise surprise, it failed, managing to shock and astonish mostly those who have never seen a horror movie before or are simply not fans of the genre. Longlegs is centered on a young FBI agent named Lee Harker, played by Micah Monroe, who becomes entangled in a chilling and complex investigation. After witnessing the death of her new partner and showcasing some special abilities, Harker is assigned to a cold case involving a series of gruesome murders that have left investigators baffled for years. The killer responsible for all this carnage, known for his meticulous and cryptic methods, has eluded capture, leaving behind a trail of mystery. He's known as Longlegs after his letter signature in the cards that he sends his victims, along with some unintelligible scribblings that have confused law enforcement for decades. The investigation takes Harker through 20 years' worth of murders, filled with a labyrinth of clues, each more perplexing than the last. It seems as if even though Longlegs committed the crimes, there's no sign he was ever in the location where they took place. It's almost as if he's able to make families butcher themselves without even entering their homes. Harker's pursuit of Longlegs puts her in direct danger, as one night after investigating some noises outside her place, she returns home to find a birthday card addressed to her. The deeper she gets, the more she realizes the case is more than just a series of random killings, and how her past is tied to these events. Harker finally discovers a pattern in the killings and the significance around important imagery and symbolism left around, and it's now up to her to capture Longlegs and prevent the next murders from taking place. For roughly 100 minutes, Oz Perkins keeps the audience in a perpetual state of tension, treating us to both subliminal and non-subliminal, unsettling imagery. That ultimately leads to nothing. Like an edging for the mind with no satisfying climax in sight. There's a looming sense of danger that never materializes, a headache-inducing set of sound effects, and plenty of quick cuts. All of this to try and cover up for a plot that is all over the place and intends to go nowhere fast. Within the movie, the genre evolution seems to be shoehorned like a deus ex machina device that tries to fill the numerous plot holes, and there are many, and provide reasons for what does not need to be explained. ESP, religion, and possessions are the tools the director uses to push the narrative forward. Too much exposition removes the mystique that surrounds the reasons behind all the killings, and the motivations are unsatisfactory at best. The way the FBI handles Lee's abilities and the initial manifestation of said abilities are simply laughable.
When all I had to do is just drive around the neighborhood and point my finger at the house and say, the bad guys ain't there.
The devil made me do it isn't a good enough reason for a movie that insists on trying to be different. The notion that evil strikes where you least expect it has also been done to death, and on that front, Longlegs delivers nothing new. Perkins seems to have been trying to channel his inner David Lynch, but ultimately coming way too short, delivering a title that's more atmospheric than anything. But an atmospheric thriller that borders on a psychological analysis of religious guilt wasn't what we were sold. It actually wasn't what we expected, and certainly not what we wanted. Predictability takes most of the screen time, killing any tension, even if there are some really, though rare, good moments. When Lee answers father to the image of an inverted triangle during the psychological evaluation at the FBI, well, I think it's a nice touch, in a rare moment when the movie achieves a sight of brilliance. The ubiquitous devil's specter in the tons of blink and you'll miss it moments just come across as a rehash of what we had already seen in 1973's The Exorcist. Still, it was a nice throwback. But once Ruby Carter invites Harker to her birthday party, savvy audience members may pack up and leave, for now they know how the movie ends. I've read multiple analyses and reviews that suggest this, well, predictable side is intentional, but for a movie that seems to be all over the place, I find that hard to believe. The title clinks too much on all these elements that we've seen time and time again. Numerology, biblical metaphors, trauma, and the loss of innocence, you name it, we've seen them time and time again. There's really nothing new, neither in the terms of the story, nor the execution. And the less said about the perception of heavy metal being a tool of the devil, the better. By the way, a pet peeve of mine when non-rock fans describe the likes of T-Rex as heavy metal. Yikes. Sometimes horror movies are saved by performances, but this time around, performances don't save Longlegs. Micah Monroe's robotic take on Clarice Sterling may be seen by many as a masterclass in acting, but it just didn't work for me. You don't necessarily need to be loud or brash to deliver a stellar performance. If we look at Silence of the Lambs, we find Jodie Foster delivering a great subdued performance. Meek but driven, Foster's Clarice Sterling is believable as Hannibal Lecter's frenemy, and the way Lecter gets into her mind is perfectly achieved. Harker and Longlegs don't share that kind of relationship. Heck, even Jason Voorhees and Chris in Friday the 13th Part 3 had a more believable interaction. If the goal was to portray an autistic-coded FBI agent, then Perkins and ultimately Longlegs have failed. And then there's Nicolas Cage. A good Nicolas Cage movie is like a nuclear accident. The odds of it happening are low, but it has happened in the past. And much like nuclear accidents, people should stay clear of most of Nicolas Cage's movies. Cage is like the acting equivalent of Ridley Scott. When each year starts, a new project is announced and the internet intelligentsia immediately decide to label it as an Oscar-worthy project. Then it fails, and then nobody even remembers it. Well, Nicolas Cage's Longlegs is what you've come to expect from a Nicolas Cage performance. As Longlegs, he comes across as an aging 1960s rocker at a Led Zeppelin tribute show. Annoying, over the top, and makes you wish you were somewhere else. Also, the way he's portrayed seems like a crossover between Tiny Tim and Mrs. Doubtfire. Odd, but not frightening. Hello! Ah! The prosthetics and the performance are further masqueraded by quick cuts. The only way to actually make Cage's Longlegs scary. Again, this villain is neither a Lecter nor a Buffalo Bill. I couldn't for a moment believe he was in control of anything, or even serving the man downstairs. You could try and make a case for style over substance, and Longlegs does have some fine moments that hinge on beautiful cinematography and masterful execution. But if I wanted triangle and demonic-driven, half-assed symbolism, I could have easily stayed home and rewatched Nicolas Winding Refn's Neon Demon. Box office buzz resulting from a $20 million opening weekend on a less than $10 million budget will give this title legs, pun intended. But my gut feel tells me that Longlegs will soon join a list of overhyped and often-ignored titles like Barbarian, Skinamarink, and The Menu. What all these titles have in common? Temporary impact, only to be forgotten permanently.
That was a nice image. Deleted.
I mean, at the end of the day, kudos for trying, but this title does not showcase experimentation. It simply comes across as someone throwing Silence of the Lambs, Zodiac, Child's Play, a hint of Amityville, and a dash of Damien, Omen 2 into a blender and hit frappe. If that was your intention, at least be upfront about it. We were promised unnerving horror, and what we got was another religious-driven art house horror title, sheep to the slaughter and just another follower of the popular trend that seems to be dominating horror in 2024.